My name is Mark Brand. You are listening to Better. I'm a social impact entrepreneur, so I build businesses that are in service to the greater community. So Better was formed to be a tool for everyday advocacy. I think anytime we take people's attention, we have to give something. Folks, welcome back to Better. This is our new format. In between interview weeks, we are going to be having these discussions that are really a little bit of a dissemination of what we've just got to listen to prior to you getting to listen to it. So we just have my dear friend Nadya on. All of her contacts and her information is below. But to give you some context, was a massive MTV Asia star, as well as a superstar model within Asia who transmuted all of that into conservation on a very large scale.
I'd actually been warned 3 times that my life was in danger with regards to the work on the ivory trade, because the same cartels that do ivory do drugs, guns, and human trafficking.
She then takes us through in this beautiful way into her internal world and how she has learned to use those skills to help people around her and all of her circles process deep traumas, lifelong issues. And so all of those things are what we're going to discuss in this episode. In a bit, Madison and I will have sort of a live back and forth, and we can't wait for you to listen to both episodes.
Okay, Mark. Hello, how are you?
I'm great, friend. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, so this episode is just going to reflect a lot of the conversation that you just had with Nadya and kind of telling the listeners like what they can expect from this episode. So can you tell me a little bit about Nadya and her story?
There's a hero's journey story in every episode. In Nadya's, it goes from professional to deeply personal. And, you know, it actually starts deeply personal with like resilience and struggle and the need to provide for a family and to be completely alone. And then to sort of have this meteoric rise of stardom. And then to have that stardom hit and to feel like I actually have the opportunity here to share with my viewership, which is in the tens of millions, how we can impact the world in a better way. And this is the 90s, right? So this is like mid 90s-ish before the internet is prolific. And so what she shares with us is, you know, viewers sending in requests to MTV Asia, but knowing that the request would only get played if there was an environmental sort of twist to it or edge to it, and taking that platform and then just exponentially increasing her commitment, her own commitment to it, into saving like lots of animals. So she started with orangutans, of course, because of where she's from in Sumatra in Indonesia, and being really close to that, but then moving towards where she'd been asked to represent, which is around the ivory trade and around elephants, and having real, genuine wins there.
Yeah, definitely. And your show's all about building better communities. So how does Nadya fit into that?
I think there's an awareness that everybody has a part to play. And I know that that's a beaten to absolute death trope of like, we all have a part to play and recycle your recyclables. But it really is an awareness and activism piece. And so how do we awaken that in each and every person in a meaningful way to say, hey, you are part of the solution. And to quote 100,000 memes, they want us to believe that we're not powerful enough to make the change. And in this episode with Nadya, and in every episode for that matter, we are saying not only are you powerful, you're critical. And so I think that comes through really brightly in this episode.
How does her story impact you specifically?
I think we all, as agents of change, people who want things to change, we look to any medium to do so. Right. So if that's directly at home, like in the surroundings that we have, fantastic. It's in our social circles for sure. Like, how can we inform each other and debate each other into a meaningful way? And so her story inspired me for the knee that she took, right? To say, oh my God, you've lived your entire life in the spotlight. And you said something very deep is changing inside me. She had a medical scare. And then that medical scare pushed her to get out of the spotlight. And, you know, and we know like that is a gigantic risk in this year, where if you're not in the algorithm every 30 seconds, you are forgotten or you are not platformed. That is such a huge thing for somebody whose entire bread and butter is made off visibility. I would ask you, like, what did you take away? What did she leave you feeling when, like, after that episode?
I feel like there was so much I didn't know about the world. And I think that's why it's so important now that these types of stories are coming out, because the world, you're right, is changing so rapidly. People are changing so quickly. I mean, you've known Nadya for like
Yeah, I'm at least 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, and obviously she has probably changed from when you first met to now, and I think it's so relevant to have these conversations and to kind of unpack, you know, the world as it changes and not be scared of that change as well.
Yeah, well, I'm not letting you go with just that one. So generationally, and if for everybody at home, tell them how old you are.
I'm 22.
Okay, right. So your generation is
Gen Z.
Gen Z. You are a Gen Zer,
Yes.
right? So when
Yes.
she says that she felt depression for the first time in her life in 2018 when she realized the existential dread of climate change, like how does that feel for you and your concentric circle of friends? Like what does climate change feel like for you? I mean, I think that's why this episode is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I feel like Gen Z especially was a big kind of pillar in the climate change movement. Like you got people like what was her name? Greta.
Thunberg?
Yes, her. She, did a lot for that community as well. And I feel like people my age, and I know my friends as well, like went to those protests for climate change and were activists for climate change. So I think Nadia's episode where she talks about like making your home more environmentally like proactive and all of those movements are so relevant to people my age.
Yeah, and what we didn't get to in the episode, which I'm now like upset that we didn't get to, so I'm just going to share it in this one, is consumption. Right. I think that
Right.
there's like this thought of consumption, and your generation in particular has done this really cool, and we see it from a consumption base, from retail, et cetera, sort of pivot into like all of my clothing is actually upcycled. Like all of the ways that I consume, I've learned to cook. I understand how these things impact me and the world around me, and so Nadia is very much in that idea or that frame of belief that we must, as individuals and consumers, continue to understand our impact on the planet as a whole and greater, right? I think I read something, and I won't platform these two shopping sites, but we know what I'm talking about when I say those two things. Like they are responsible for something like 35 to 40% of global shipping. Like imagine these two things that didn't exist 6, 7 years ago are now responsible for being one of the greatest polluters in the world. So our consumption of those things, if it went to zero, they don't exist.
Actually, a big topic she touched on was small things also making a big difference. So like you may not like somebody may not think like, oh, going to a thrift store versus a retail store would make that much of a difference. But if everybody does a little thing like that, it does make a greater impact. And I think Nadia had a really good way of sharing that message in a way that's very digestible and understandable for somebody like me who doesn't know too much about everything. But it was nice to hear her perspective and feel like I can also make that change.
Yeah, I mean, this whole show doesn't stand up unless there's that exact reaction. There's like we're
Yeah.
never going to waste anybody's time with these episodes, right? It's not a like come and listen and maybe you might pick something up. It's not you're definitely, if you're actually listening, right? If this isn't in the background while you're, watching paint dry, but you're actually
Yeah.
actively listening, you're going to
Yeah.
get so much from it each and every time. And like, so, if you're listening at home, the amount of curation and time and pre-work that Madison, who's with us right now, and Amina and the entire team also do. And then my curation and around these episodic guests with Nadia, she's been on the guest list since season 1. We're 40 episodes in at this point, and this is like how thoughtful and how tactful this is in and around bringing you these guests. So I'm glad that you got that and you genuinely got that, because we've had no time to
Yeah.
discuss this offline. So listen to the episode, and this topic in particular, we have lots of stuff in the can that you can go back and listen to. The person who came to mind was Rhett Butler from Manga Bay, like huge episode, and Dr. Sylvia Earle, aka Her Deepness, and scientists in residence when the White House still mattered. These sorts of people are still like on the list to go back, and this episode will be one of those, pun intended, evergreen episodes that are tools that will always matter for our lifetime for sure.
Yeah, it is. We're in an interesting time for sure. But it makes me so grateful that we have podcasts like yours who are educating with people who are well known in their fields and want to help make the world a better place.
Critical. And that's, I think one of the gifts of network, and this show was born out of me being backstage. Funnily enough, like it was this massive marketing conference called Worlds. And it was just one of those, like I've had a bunch of moments that led to this podcast, but I was backstage and Steve Aoki was in the green room. And there's another gentleman who was like advocating in and around like understanding immigration laws. And we're having these conversations. And I'm like, oh my God, if somebody else heard this conversation, they would feel like they could access this information. And so how do we create more access to information that isn't just filling the void?
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me, Mark.
Always a pleasure. And folks, thank you for listening to this precursor, or this like massive excitement to the upcoming episode with Nadya. All the details are below. If you want to do a little research prior to understand her as a guest, well worth doing. And we can't wait for you to listen then. I'm Mark Brand, and you've been listening to Better.